Welcome to Keep Hustling, where we are going past the why to get to the how. I'm your host, the always hustling Aaron Gordon, aka NY Risk Advisor, aka Mr. #Keep Hustling. In this podcast, we will be diving deep into the professional and personal successes of our guests to find out how they hustled through the most difficult times in their life and their development to achieve the success they've gotten to today. So buckle up for what hopes to be an amazing ride. And of course, now and always, keep hustling. Welcome to Keep Hustling with my guest, Carey Wallace. Carey, thank you so much for being here.
It is my honor, my friend, my honor.
I feel, I've said this a couple times, but this time I really feel, and you're going to hate me for saying this, but it's the truth. I haven't been this nervous to record a podcast yet, and it has nothing to do with our relationship or what I think of you, but I think that you are such an important powerhouse of our industry, and we've mentioned this before, and I mean this in the nicest possible way. You remind me a lot of my mom, which is great, who is my mentor and boss and all that jazz. So the same way that if my mom ever agrees to come on here, I would be somewhat nervous. And that's a compliment. I promise you. Please don't. But thank you for coming on.
You know, that means a lot to me, Aaron, actually. I got to tell you. And so I'm honored that you had me. And hopefully by the end of this, you feel at great ease because I very much value our friendship. And that takes a lot to remind someone of someone so important to them. So thank you.
So that's the truth. For those who don't know Carey Wallace, what do we need to know about the upbringing of Carey Wallace that put her, and the story of Carey Wallace that put her into the chair as the CEO of Agency Focus and the founder, and kind of what got you to where you are today?
You know, it's funny. As soon as you told me we were going to be talking about upbringing, which was only like 30 seconds ago, there's one thing that stands out with my upbringing, and I think it actually is huge and very, very pivotal to who I am. So I'm an Army brat. My dad was in the Army, and we moved like clockwork every 18 months. And never overseas, always stateside. But that makes you form friendships very quickly, get involved very, very quickly, and also be able to move on, which is a hard thing. That was really tough when I was really young, but basically segment your life. You know what I mean? So that has served me very well. Like I can figure out how to work a room pretty quickly and find connections. And I think it's helped me connect with agents. And, you know, it was a skill that some people never have to learn. Like if you're always around comfortable people and always around comfortable things, you stay comfortable with the people you know, like, and trust. Well, for me, those people changed every 18 months. Think about that.
So it's crazy you say that, because I think you're the third person to talk about this. It might be a future episode, but in that I've recorded this, and I haven't asked. I missed the opportunity to ask the following question. I think that you're the perfect person to ask this follow up to, and that is, I totally get the advantage of being a junior in high school and having to figure out how to fit into a social construct at 17 years old or 18 years old, then like, hey, when I go to a networking event, like what's the big deal? You develop that. If you like me, great. If you don't like me, that's fine. Odds are I won't be here in 18 months, but even if I am, like those relationships that are meaningful will stay, and those that are not, you can just kind of delete, which I think a lot of people overthink. But does it make it harder to dive deeper when you have somewhat of a inherent, I don't want to say fear, but tilt towards like nothing in life is long term? And I'm not talking about, you know what I'm saying? Like there's a certain vulnerability in people that are creating longer term connections and taking that kind of a risk that's different than, oh, I'm kind of going to move. And so like when you settle down, how does that kind of lay itself out?
So I'll never forget this, and maybe it'll answer your question, but we actually lived in Daytona Beach, Florida, and we knew our next move was going to be to a Honolulu, Hawaii, which that's
nice.
not
now
like
we're talking.
Yeah. So that's not like we're going to drive 3 hours and visit you kind of situation. That is like, I'm never going to see these people again. And I remember being upset with my parents for like 6 months that I lost my best friend who was in Daytona, Florida, and told them I'm never going to have another best friend. Like, I'm just never going to do it. It hurts too bad in order to build this friendship that is going to go away.
And this is pre-social media, pre all that. So it was you just pick up the cell phone or text or whatever. Yeah. I'm not dating you. I'm just saying.
You called me your mom. Hello. So
I said you remind me of my mom. So
anyway, so I remember thinking that, like, that's like your defense mechanism, that I'm just not going to attach to anybody because it's too difficult to do that. And the reality is, though, Aaron, when you move and you move and you move, you want to connect. I mean, you can't help but connect because you got to make the most of where you are. And the second thing is you connect deeply with the people that matter most. So, also growing up, because we moved, our only vacations until I was 16 years old was to Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania to see my family. So like my cousins were my best friends. My aunts and uncles are pillars of my childhood. And so that bond stayed really, really tight. So I think you connect with the ones that are constant in a completely different way. I don't know that my cousins would have been that important had I stayed in one place and, you know what I mean? And had a best friend that lasted, 30 years or 50 years. Like, I don't have that. That's just different for me.
Do you think, I'm going to borrow a term from my father, he should rest in peace. Do you think your BS meter was like super, super fine tuned? And so, and the reason why I say that is because I would assume that now later in life, and obviously with media and with the cell phones and things like that, and the ability to connect to people or stay in touch with people, I assume that when you meet someone, having that skill really fine-tuned says, okay, great. So then after that meeting or after that event or whatever, I can either delete or press on and utilize that skill.
I'll just say it this way. I think you get to read people very quickly, very accurately, and become super efficient at that. So you're able to discern, this is the person I want to be around. This is the one I want to avoid. This is the person that I'm not sure that I'll give a little bit of time to. So yeah, I think, and again, if you're at the same school with the same people in the same small town, you probably do that. But I don't know. I definitely think it gave me the ability to read people in a different way. Yeah.
I should have led with this, so I apologize, but thank you for your sacrifice. Everyone says thank you to those who served. I always say those who served are far better than me. Not only would you know me well enough to know I never would have made it like that, but I can imagine that your sacrifice was great. So before we continue, I just wanted to say thank you for that. Off topic, what was your favorite place that you lived in?
So, let's see. Well, we actually got to move back to Pittsburgh. So that was pretty cool. My dad actually was medically.
Stop. Hard stop. New Yorkers coming in here. And my risk is swooping in. I'm born and raised in New York City. You told me Daytona Beach, Florida, and then you jumped to Honolulu, Hawaii, and the words, you went with Pittsburgh?
You know why, though, right?
Pittsburgh?
I mean, think about it. I was so close to my family. I was able to actually be in the place that we always vacation. I got to hang out with my grandmother on a regular basis.
Carey, it's Pittsburgh.
It's beautiful. I love Pittsburgh. Pittsburgh is wonderful. Are you kidding me? No, it was by far my favorite place to live, and it was all about the people. There's no two ways around that. Yeah.
Okay. I'm going to get myself in trouble here, but I'm just going for it because this is fun. We're having fun on this recording here, this podcast, Keep Hustling podcast. I looked at the University of Pittsburgh for college.
Oh, see, the truth comes out.
And well, we drove, my father should rest in peace, and I drove from New York City to Pittsburgh. We stopped off in a motel on the way, went the next morning, and then drove back straight the next day. And when we got in the car to come home, I don't know if it was silent a little while, and then my father, I'll never forget, he looks at me, he goes, "You're not going there. You can't. It's too. This is not for. It's not for you." It was by the way, beautiful college campus, but
yeah,
I need a subway. I need rats. I need pigeons. I need,
Yeah. I've got to tell you, though, when you go through that tunnel and it opens up to downtown, it's so beautiful, right?
But not Honolulu.
I mean, Honolulu's a beautiful place, but Honolulu was different when you're living there versus when you're visiting there. There was
probably very isolating being out of the continent.
Very isolated.
You probably feel that more.
Yeah.
Like what we love about vacationing there, you probably like,
Yeah. I mean, people get like island fever. It's hard. So, I was also very young, so I didn't really appreciate that I was living in Hawaii. It was a different situation. But yeah, that wasn't my favorite by any stretch of the imagination, to be quite honest with you. So
you heard it here first, Pittsburgh. Carey Wallace for mayor of Pittsburgh. Pittsburgh over Honolulu. I apologize. I interrupted. You were saying Pittsburgh and something about your father, and then I interrupted you about New York.
So you said a story that reminded me. First of all, my father was the best man who lived the earth. I can tell you that for sure. But we went on college visits together, and I only applied to 3 places, Aaron. This is super funny. So I was living in Du Bois, Pennsylvania, which is the middle of Pennsylvania, nowhere. I mean, it's like whatever. So I applied to Pitt, Penn State, and West Virginia. And so the same reason that I told you I loved Pittsburgh, which is I wanted to be around my family, is the opposite reason I picked West Virginia to go to, because I didn't want my family all in my business while I was in college. So if I stayed in Penn State, it was too close to my mother. If I stayed in Pitt, there was way too many bells that would absolutely have things to say about what I was doing. And West Virginia was just far enough away that I could probably do what I wanted to do.
No stop-ins. You're not going to show up unannounced.
That's right. Yeah.
I love that. You were saying your father, I think you were saying something about medical.
Yeah. So, you said, I appreciate you saying the sacrifice, because the families do sacrifice. My father served a term in Vietnam. He was a pilot. He flew helicopters, but he ended up being medically discharged because he ended up having some major health issues from Agent Orange. And so there was a lot of sacrifice during his service as well as the rest of his life, sadly. And it is a lot. But here's the thing I would tell you about my dad. And he would have told you this at age 50, 40, 30, didn't matter. He would have never traded serving his country, and he would have happily served again. There's no 2 ways around that.
It's, I find that one of the things that's missing in our generation, I speak about my generation, you're just a quarter of a generation ahead of me. As I said, remind me of my mom, not my mom. But I think that there was, and this gets to the hustle also, is that there was a certain passion for service. Mm-hmm. And it could be serving your country, it could be serving your community, it could be serving your family, it could be serving in many different aspects and facets. But yet there was that idea of service. And I think that what's interesting is that a lot of people nowadays join the U.S. military, I think, to get away from things.
Yeah.
And the service is secondary. Yeah. And I think in that generation, we saw it a little bit in the post 9/11 world where people kind of had that, that situation. But that's, I just think that passion is something that's missing. And when we talk about inspiring people's hustle or how we can develop relationships or careers or find our path, being passionate about service, whatever that is, serving your company, serving your country, serving your family, serving your community, I think that that's something that people should really focus on.
Yeah, I would agree with you. I think that sometimes it's a lost thing, but then I'm really, really excited when I see it in people around me. And those are the people I want to be around. Because, I think if you're doing something, you should be extremely passionate about what you're doing. And if not, people can feel that you're not,
I think, and what's amazing is the things that certain people are passionate about. Some people are like,
right.
The example that I joke around about all the time is like, I have a very passionate podiatrist. The guy's amazing. He's great. Right. But
yeah, I'm with
passion.
you.
But then again, it's funny because I actually once said to him the last time I was like, what's the deal? Like, you take this really seriously? And he goes, if I don't do my job, you can't walk. There's a chance you can't walk. Or maybe not you, but one of my other patients. And so you think of it as, it's funny, the guy's the foot doctor, but feet are kind of important.
Absolutely.
So that's another piece of passion of service. But to me, the thought of doing that is crazy. But to this guy, probably the thought of getting yelled at by insurance consumers is probably crazy. And I'm passionate about that. So I know your career hasn't been super linear. And so I want to try to get to the most pivotal moment early on, mid-career, recently, whatever it is, whichever inning you want to call it. But I found that even the people who we think have it the easiest have had a moment where they've made a decision. And it could be to stay where they are. It could be to move, to make a big change, a small change. But there's that pivotal moment where the hustle is clear, what to do and how to do it. Maybe not how quick it's going to be or the ultimate success. But if I had to press you on that moment, what would it be for you?
So you're right. My career is not linear, which is interesting. I actually think of my career in 3 sections, believe it or not. So I think of it as my first career, which was in a tech startup that we were able to take, which was the best. It was the best education that you could ever ask for. People say, like, why didn't you get an MBA? Why didn't you get this? I got an MBA. I got a law degree. I got an accounting degree. I got all kinds of degrees just by taking a company public. So, I think about that. And then I think about being a parent. And I chose to stay home. I was fortunate enough to be able to make that choice for our family. And then I think about my career in insurance. And as you're asking me that, I can think of pivotal moments in all 3, to be quite honest with you. But if I'm being honest, the choice to stay home was difficult. There was a lot of people that thought, that knew me when I was in college, thought that I was an incredibly driven, very focused person. And to think that I was a stay-at-home mom, they were like, she must have hit her head. Like, we don't know how she is the person that's staying home. But for me, I knew what it took to be really good at my job. And I knew that I couldn't do that and be a good parent at the same time. I knew that there was no way I would figure out how to give partial to both and try and be a good parent. And, and in my situation, my oldest daughter had some special needs. So it turned out to be the best decision I've ever made because I was able to be there and advocate for her and actually be super passionate about figuring that out. So that is one of the pivotal moments, I think, because it's a difficult decision to make. When you get so much joy out of accomplishing things, moving forward, blazing new trails, it's tough to think, okay, now I'm going to switch to something where the job's never done. There's never something to scratch off a list because there's 1,000 other things to do. I mean, parenting and a typical job are not the same thing. They're just not, right? So that was a pretty pivotal moment for me to make that choice.
There is so much to unpack there. I have a couple follow-up questions. First, I just want to be clear on this. When you made the decision to put your career, your external career on hold, you didn't yet know about the additional needs that your daughter would have?
No idea. So I'll tell you how that worked out.
Isn't that crazy?
Yeah, it's kind of funny. So I lived in DC at the time and we had taken the company public and we were on the NASDAQ. So we were, the financial filing that was required for a public company versus the private company that I'd worked for forever was very different. So actually I took maternity leave a month early so I could train someone to do what was required, for that. And so what's interesting though is the whole time, like we had a nanny set up. I was going to come back to work. I was going to, I actually thought I wanted to do multiple IPOs. I was going to continue my career. Like I couldn't think another way because I loved what I did. And then I had Morgan and basically said to my husband, who had changed jobs, by the way. So he went from top of the sales to a new salesperson in a different industry. We made the same amount of money. So now he's just cut his pay. And I'm on maternity leave saying, I think I'm not going to go back to work now. And he's like, I'm sorry, what? How's that going to work out? And so obviously I crunched the numbers. We figured it out. And I just said, I just don't know how I'm going to grind like I did in my business. And she wasn't diagnosed until she was about 3 years old. We knew that there were challenges when she was about 1 year old, actually more like 9 to 10 months old. They started to be, okay, this doesn't seem right, but I'm a new mom. I don't really know what I'm looking at. But yeah, so I had no idea when I made that decision. I truly didn't. And our deal was, if I can't pay cash for a car, I've got to go back to work. So that was our litmus test.
Can't pay cash for a car, I got to go back to work. I like that.
Yeah.
But it's amazing how that, like, because yeah, wow.
I know.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow. Okay, I got to ask you another question about that,
Sure.
about that first career. I think people only dream of taking companies public. So what is it like?
Oh, it's fun.
What is it like when you realize that this company's going public?
It was
Like, that's the ultimate, like, hustle pat on the back.
Yeah.
Like, we did it. We're going public. Now, obviously, I assume that then there's a lot of paperwork, and then it doesn't happen till months, but there's got to be a moment when you're like, we are going public.
So it's a thing, Aaron. It's, a lot of people during that time, it was the tech bubble. So there was a lot of people thinking that's going to be our path. We're going to do this. I mean, it's kind of like InsurTech today. Like, everybody is building something in order to be bought by someone, right? So
yeah, but none of them go public.
I know, but
public
it's
is like
different,
a whole different
right?
level.
Yeah. So I remember the time when we actually had figured out the model, and you have to have investors that will back you and take you through the IPO process. So there's multiple different checkpoints, if you will. So we had to do several private placements, but there was a couple acquisitions that got us positioned to say, okay, now this is something that we think can sustain through an IPO process. And it's grueling. I mean, it's like 16, 18-hour days for a period of time. I was newly married. Again, my husband's a saint. He's a saint now because I kind of feel like I'm doing the same thing, but,
yes, Mr. Wallace is my hero.
I know he's something, but here's the thing. The people that you are doing it with become your family, and you have to trust them implicitly. And if you don't, I think that's where things fall apart. So I was the 9th employee of this organization, and I worked with them for 6 years by the time I left, and we went public at the end of the 4th year. So it was. How do you keep grinding when you know? I mean, some might say that it's easy, like, oh, there's a huge pot of gold at the end. We just got to push this rock to the end. But at the same time, it's also like, we don't need to make another sale. Like, we just need to get to the pot of gold. But like, so how do you keep that hustle going when you're like, that's it? I know.
But
it's not that's it, because there's lots of people.
Did you ring the bell? Did you come to New York and ring the bell?
We definitely came to New York, yes. And we went on an IPO roadshow, which was a ton of fun. And it was.
Why would you come to New York? Pittsburgh is such a great city. Why would you come to New York?
You're so funny, Aaron. That happened to be where our investors were. So yes.
Oh, it happens to be where the money is.
Happened to be where the money is.
Shocker, pigeons and money. New York Risk Advisor, keep hustling in New York City. So
that's funny.
So then you decide to come back into the workforce.
Yeah.
And was that when you started your own company, or there was something else in between? I really don't know.
I actually, so this is kind of funny too. So the same child that, had some challenges when she was getting ready to go to middle school, her and her younger sister sat me down and basically said, which is Lindsay, sat me down and basically said, listen, Mom, you need a hobby. Like, you're a lot, and you need to find a hobby, and we're good. I'm going to advocate for myself. You did a great job, but please, Lord, find a hobby. So, I actually,
Dad is suffering. We're suffering. just by the way, fast forward. Dun, dun, dun. How many flights have you taken this year? Dun, dun, dun.
Fair number. Yeah. Fair number.
Right.
Yeah. I don't even know if I have the count anymore. That's sad.
Right.
But anyway, so, I actually applied. This is hilarious. I took 12 years off with Morgan and Lindsay. So it was not a small stint. That's why
serious.
I'm saying
Serious.
3 chunks. But, and I applied on a Thursday, I think, and I was hired on a Tuesday to start at a state association, and they were thinking of merging at the state level. So again, I had some M&A background. They hired me as an accounting clerk, believe it or not. And then I quickly moved into their CFO role. When you take that much time off, you're not really sure you're employable, which is kind of comical saying that out loud right now, but that is how you feel because,
100%. The world is moving in a totally different,
yeah,
I can't imagine, it's when I was in middle school, the headmistress of the school, her name was Susan Mukasey. She's an amazing, amazing lady. And her husband is Michael Mukasey. Michael Mukasey went on to become the Attorney General of the United States. But at the time when I was in middle school, he was a federal judge in New York. Mm-hmm. And right before not to date myself, but right before I was in that lower school, he had been the judge on the first World Trade Center bombing.
Wow.
And so they had federal protection. Her whole family had federal protection. And so growing up, honest to God, when you got sent to the principal's office, you had to sit at the desk outside of her office with a marshal.
Oh, wow.
Like a dude with his gun on the table next to the New York Times. And the reason why I tell the story is she then, after a certain period of time, however they figure out, the Executive Protection Service figures out that it's okay, you can go back to being a normal citizen. Being the parent of Daniel Gordon, my twin brother, and Aaron Gordon, not my older brother Ben, but Daniel Aaron Gordon, means that you become very close to the administration of your children's institutions. Very close. So my parents became friends with the Mukaseys somewhat, and so when she lost her executive, when they took away the executive protection, she tells my mother that she went on the subway and she couldn't get on. And I was like, what do you mean? She said, they don't take tokens anymore. I asked them where you buy tokens. And then they went to MetroCards, right? So it was like,
right.
So obviously that's a small example, but you can imagine that. Yeah. And what was it? 10 years, 12 years, 15 years, whatever that is.
Yeah. I was
the story is he ended up becoming the Attorney General and now they're back.
Yeah.
Right? He ended up becoming the Attorney General and now it's back. But it's like, right?
Yeah.
It's like the whole, forgetting about you probably questioned your own skill set.
I totally did. 100%. I mean, it was crazy.
Who are these 19-year-olds with Excel spreadsheets?
I know. I'm like, okay. And what's the protocol? I don't even know how people engage anymore. And remember, I came from a startup that the only reason I left is because I gave birth to a child. I loved the job. But it was in essence my first job. So I was pretty immature and I didn't have a lot of experience in working in a lot of places. So it was interesting. So anyway, yeah. And
so what made you take the next leap, which is also a quantum leap, to start your own company? Other than filling, and for those who don't know, check out the session notes. You should, if you're in anything having to do with the insurance space or know anyone who's in the insurance space, make sure that you check out Carey Company. They're doing incredible things and really helping a lot of people in the industry, other than seeing a huge void in the industry, right? Because a lot of people can see that. It's probably a leap to go from feeling you're unemployable to then working at a safe institution, for lack of a better term, meaning stable in terms of stability. Big eyes are not going anywhere, or they might merge, but that industry or that part of do my own thing. Company of one, one of one. Yeah. So it's interesting. I joined that organization. I quickly moved into a CFO role. They did do a merger at the state level, which I got to be a part of. And honestly, Aaron, I thought maybe I'll stick around, but that was cute. And, I got my feet wet and maybe I'll go back into some M&A work. And what's interesting was there was this board of agents that I love. I mean, they're some of my closest friends today, very forward thinking, that said two things. First they asked themselves, what is our value proposition once we do this? And number one, it was helping agents buy and sell their businesses with the right resources, because there was nobody serving 83% of the agency force. And number two, we have all of this data. How can we leverage this data to help agents? So I ended up leading. Here she goes with the data. We're talking about hustling. I know. Here she goes with the data. I know. So anyway, I ended up leading a data analytics company. I became their lead consulting for evaluation and perpetuation planning services. And I was still part of the leadership of the Big I. And honestly, those were 3 full-time roles. There's no question about it. And,
just like being part of a startup, when I left the startup, I think they hired 3 people to replace my role. I really like doing a lot of work. But at the association, I was really struggling with which role I wanted to be my only role and the decisions that had to come with that. So there were a lot of things that caused me to leave, one of which was struggling with that. But an association is not a for-profit. It just isn't. It's not established to be a for-profit. There was a push-pull on how to operate a data analytics company that is a for-profit out of a nonprofit with all nonprofits as your investors. And at the end, there is a conflict with what those two purposes are. And I was caught in the crossfires, unfortunately, in that. And it became really apparent that that was not a place for me. So I ended up leaving. And what I loved the most is when I got to work with agents one-on-one, when I got in their agency, understood what they were doing. So I had to ask myself, do I want to go to another state association and work in that team? Do I want to consult, or do I want to find plenty of places that are leveraging data inside our agency? Like, what do I want to do? And, it's really funny. 3 people reached out to me when I left that company, and I didn't leave with a plan. I did not at all. Like I left, I actually had a health issue and I ended up leaving. And David Carruthers is one who said, "Hey, can you still come on the podcast and talk about data or valuation?" There was one other person who runs,
and everyone knows, future guest, everyone knows, you don't say no to David Carruthers. So
well, if they don't know David Carruthers, they should, because he was instrumental in me moving forward.
And my career as well.
Yeah. AJ, who runs CAA and Network, they had already engaged with me and said, "I'd really like you to come and talk about valuation." And I said, "Hey, listen, I'm not in that role anymore. I don't think you need me to come." He's like, "Nope, you still have the knowledge. We'd like you to do that." So there were people that started asking me to continue to do what I was doing, and they didn't care that I wasn't part of an organization. They just cared that it was someone that they felt was knowledgeable. And then Albie Knight, honestly, said, "I'd love for you to come speak at an event." And I'm like, "Are you sure? Like, I'm not really part of it." He's like, "Yeah, you're a great speaker. Absolutely." So there were people that believed in me, and honestly, they helped convince me that maybe this was the right path. So, it was really kind of an interesting time, because it really wasn't on my bucket list to own my own business, but I am an entrepreneur at heart. I love the startup world, and it has been a ride, a very rewarding ride, because there's a lot of people out here that have helped me get where I'm going. So
isn't it, first of all, I am grateful that you did that.
Thank you.
But isn't it amazing how we develop the skills earlier on, and sometimes we don't see where that skill is going to take us, or where that path is going to take us. And obviously there are people who are more creative minded and more numbered minded than that. But it's like, when you went back to work, the thought of, you weren't even in the insurance industry, and now you're probably one of the most well-recognized people in the independent channel, and it was from a skill set that you kind of had already. Mm-hmm. So it's just interesting how
that happens. Our
lives or careers might evolve.
Yeah.
But if you stick with that hustle, the picture might change, but that stuff kind of all drives back to that original bottom line. So I just find that amazing.
Yeah, it is kind of crazy. I do say, like, I did find a way to do M&A. I just did it on my own terms, right?
And doing a lot of it. So we are grateful for that. Before we get to our conclusion, just because I know that you do travel a lot, and I pressed you on the city, and I was disappointed with the answer. So now we're going to get to, I don't want to get you in any trouble, so I'm not going to ask you your least favorite, but what's your favorite airport? You've been in them all. You've been in literally everyone in America. Everyone.
My favorite airport.
And if you say New York, I'll be upset, because we have horrible airports. So I don't want you to say New York.
No, definitely not. The easiest airport to get around, I mean, you're not going to like my answer, but my favorite airport is probably the Savannah or Hilton Head Airport, because that means I'm going home. So
I love that.
I
love that.
Savannah is one of the easiest airports to get in and out of, which is nice.
There's 2 gates.
Yeah, Hilton Head is like 2 gates. So I'd have to say those are my favorite, because that means I'm on my way home.
I love it. Thank you.
Yes.
We have a closing tradition on this podcast, and that is we ask our guests before we close, what their current top of mind or favorite all-time inspirational quote is and why it's inspirational to them.
So my dad always taught me that you should never pass up the opportunity to tell another person what they mean to you. And I try to live my life by that every day.
Well, Carey Wallace, you mean a lot to me. You mean a lot to all of my friends in the industry. You know that. I really hope I get to see you soon when I get back to traveling. And it means a lot that you were here, that you shared your story, the ups, the downs, the sideways parts, loving Pittsburgh, which I'll get over eventually. I probably will never live it down. And really, really, really thank you for being here.
Yeah, thank you for having me on, Aaron. I hope I see you soon, too. I miss you. Definitely miss you.
This has been another episode of Keep Hustling. Remember, do well by doing good, and always and forever keep hustling. All right, hustlers, that brings us to the end of another fantastic episode. Thank you for listening. Be sure to subscribe to our podcast so you never miss an episode. If you have any suggestions, comments, or even just want to say hello, please feel free to reach out to us on all social media platforms. We are Keep Hustling Pod. Until next time, stay curious, stay hungry, and keep hustling.